Hello, everyone, and welcome to our coffee tonight. We have a really special person here with us today. Is Roger Dooley. He is expert in neuromarketing, author in Forbes, contributor of magazines, and is a keynote speaker. So, welcome, Roger. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Gemma. Thank you for inviting me onto the show.
Thank you very much for being here with us. It's a pleasure for me to have you here. How is everything?
Well, I am in Austin, Texas, and things are rather nice now. About, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks ago, we had a huge freeze here.
Oh,
Never gets that, it hasn't gotten that cold in like 40 years here.
wow.
But all of our tropical plants died outside. Our palm trees
Oh,
are all looking brown, but now it's nice. So spring is here, and
oh, that's good.
COVID is not too bad here. It's pretty much under control
Huh.
in Texas. So far so good.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, that's good to hear because some places are a little worse, so that's good. And can you tell us a little about your background so that the people can know better who you are?
Well, sure. Very briefly,
Mm.
I began my career as an engineer. Worked in engineering for a few years. Got my master's in business, and also at the same time, I was transitioning into more managerial roles than
Hmm.
technical. I really felt my corporate career was taking off when I was about 30. I was in charge of strategic planning for a Fortune
Oh,
1000 company, and I chose that moment to bail out and become an entrepreneur. In the early days of home computers, I started a direct marketing company.
wow.
And since then, I've been an entrepreneur just about continuously. I built various businesses over the years in the IT space, in the digital space. I built something called College Confidential, which became the biggest website for college-bound students and parents. Sold that to part of the Daily Mail Group out of London some years back. Stayed with them for a little while. So for a brief time, I was once again a corporate executive after the acquisition. But then I returned to my entrepreneurial roots. And in recent years, I am pretty much focused on being an author and speaker and trainer. The That to me now, what I'm trying to do is spread the ideas in my books, uh, particularly my latest book, Friction.
Yeah, we are going to talk today about that book because it's really interesting and really useful that everyone should keep in mind how important it is for the company. But when you talk about friction, what are you talking about exactly? What do you mean for the people that is not into this?
Sure. Well, I think in English, friction has multiple meanings. There's a physical
Yes.
friction, like the brakes on your car. There is interpersonal friction. If you have a problem with a coworker, that can be called friction. But the kind of friction that I focus on is what I define simply as any unnecessary effort to perform a task. In other words, if in trying to get something done as a customer, as an employee, as a citizen, if you have to waste effort doing that, then that is friction. Much like your car's rolling resistance is wasting
Yes.
energy, it's not moving you forward, it's just going away as heat. So much of our experience as customers and employees is wasted. When
Hmm.
it takes you twice as much effort to check out as necessary, that's friction. If, as an employee, you have to waste your time uh, filling out, say, forms or getting approvals that aren't really necessary, that's
Yes.
friction. So these days, I'm focused on trying to help people find friction and eliminate it in their company's customer experience, as well as in their team experience.
Yeah, that's really important. And how can do business remove friction? What can they do to start removing friction?
Well, I think first of all, you have to recognize that it is important. I think
Mhm.
that many there are a couple of reasons companies don't see friction. Let me talk about a couple of examples that will
Yes, that's
probably
good.
our listeners can relate to. For most of my life, I thought taxis were an effort reducer. They were less effort than taking public transportation. They were less effort than walking a long distance. And so I saw taxis as being a friction reducer. And then Uber came along, and suddenly not just I, but all of us saw how much wasted effort there was in that taxi process that we didn't see before. It was there, but we didn't see it. From standing by the side of the street waving to try and get a taxi, to wondering whether the taxi was taking you on a longer route to increase the fare, to payment at the end, where you either have to get out and deal with cash and change, or sometimes get out a credit card and deal with a problematic credit card reader. That could waste minutes at the end of the transaction. Suddenly, Uber showed us that none of that was necessary. All you had to do was dial up the taxi. You didn't have to stand waving your arms. You knew if it was on its way, you could see how far it was away. One of my more troublesome taxi experiences that happened occasionally was I would call ahead for a taxi because I needed to get to the airport for a flight. And I'd be looking at my watch saying, he's late. Now, did that mean that he was just around the corner, or that they forgot about me completely and I was going to miss my flight? With Uber, okay, well, he is just around the corner, so it's not a problem. The payment process, so simple. You just say goodbye. That's all. It all happens automatically in the background. And now, if I have to take a conventional taxi, because there's still some places in Europe and other places in the world where you can't get an Uber, then I just find that conventional taxi to be a very high friction process. And another very current example is Zoom. Before the pandemic, we might be getting on a WebEx, or as we're now communicating on a Skype or a Hangout or something like that. But within about maybe 2 or 3 months of the pandemic starting, suddenly we were all on Zoom. In fact, we called any web conversation we had a Zoom. We talked about Zoom fatigue and too many Zooms today, regardless of the technology. How did Zoom suddenly become the generic word for any kind of a web meeting or web conference? And I think it's in part because of how easy Zoom is compared to their competitors. The mission statement for Zoom is to make communications frictionless. That's a low friction mission statement. I tried to find their biggest competitor over the years has been Cisco and the WebEx platform. I tried to find a mission statement for Cisco. I couldn't even find one on their website, either with their site search or with Google. Finally, on a third-party website, I found an older one, and it talked about shaping the future of the internet by creating unprecedented value for investors and customers and ecosystem partners. What does this even mean? How do I know as an employee, say if I'm a web developer trying to improve the web interface for WebEx, am I creating unprecedented value for ecosystem partners when I make this change? Who knows? If I worked at Zoom, if I'm in their compliance department saying, I'm going to add this little feature for compliance, is that going to further the mission statement by making things more frictionless, or is it going to add friction? I have perfect clarity.
Yeah, you can.
To me, and even in the lead up to the pandemic, and like 3 years before the pandemic began, Zoom was already accelerating past WebEx and their competition. But suddenly, when IT departments were faced with having to onboard hundreds of people working remotely, what did they choose? Even if they were a Microsoft-oriented company or a Cisco-oriented company, if they had to suddenly deal with hundreds of new users who were non-technical and trying to get them operational, they turned to Zoom because they could do it easily. It was almost frictionless to get them going. So to me, these are examples of where people didn't really see friction, but suddenly we saw it, and it was disruptive. Zoom disrupted these much larger companies. They were a startup 10 years ago, and they were competing with giants like Cisco and Microsoft and Google, but they blew past them, just as Uber blew past all the traditional taxi companies. So, to me, when you see friction and when you eliminate it, you can be not just accelerating your own growth, you can disrupt much bigger, much better finance brands.
Yeah, sometimes, but it's what you say. Sometimes you don't realize, like with the taxi, when you say it, it's like, wow, it's true. We have to deal with all those things, and also the uncertainty to know, like, oh, it will come or not come, or if you don't call, will a taxi pass by? But you don't think in that moment. But when Uber arrives, it's like, wow, what a difference.
Right. Well, we assume that things are the way they are because that's the way they have to be. That's the best way. And when you go to a website, before the pandemic, I was typically flying 100,000 miles a year or more on United Airlines or its partner airlines, and I always have a super frustrating experience with their website. And surprisingly, their mobile app is much better. Their mobile app is quite good.
Hmm.
The user interface is good. It keeps evolving and getting better and better. But their website seems frozen in time, as if they designed it 10 years ago and haven't been able to make more than cosmetic tweaks ever since. And I think some of the things like their security procedures that uh, you know every few weeks, particularly even as a very frequent user, when I was constantly on their website making reservations, checking them, or checking flight status, every few weeks they would suddenly decide they did not recognize the computer that I've been using for years previously.
Oh,
And they would challenge me with these crazy questions like, Roger, we don't recognize your device. Tell us what your best friend's birthday is. Or, which kind of movie do you like? It's like, I'm trying to get to the airport. Why are you
yeah.
asking me these crazy questions? And I've got to remember, who did I think my best friend was and what is their birthday anyway? I mean, this is insane. But they have not seen fit to eliminate that. And I think that's because their compliance person or their security person is saying, well, this is the way it has to be so that we don't get hacked. We have to do this. Well, if their chief executives had to deal with this. If they also were, say, an Amazon customer, they would see that all successful businesses do not do it that way. Some
True.
have found much better ways of doing that than logging out customers every few weeks because maybe somehow your cookie design is poor. I have Amazon uses cookies just like United does, but Amazon must bake better cookies because I am never logged out of Amazon.
Yes,
I
true.
think I would have to reformat my hard drive to get logged out of Amazon, where United, who knows why those cookies disappear, but they constantly do, and they create massive friction every single time. But somewhere somebody in that company is saying, well, this is the way it has to be, and the executives are not pushing back. They're not saying, does it really have to be this way? Can you show us examples of companies that are doing this way? That they probably, in many cases, the reason companies don't see friction is because the decision makers don't use their own products.
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
pretty sure if the CEO of United needs to get on a flight, he tells his assistant, and it is currently a he, says, hey, I need to get to this place, and they take care of the rest. If there's
Yes.
friction there, that's their job to deal with the friction.
Yeah, true.
Uh, if you forced the CEO of many big companies to use their company's website, to use their company's mobile app as a novice user, and they would be a novice user because they probably haven't had to do it, they would be surprised at what their customers have to go through. Because what they get is feedback from their executives. Yes, we've improved our customer experience. Look, our net promoter score, says we're 7.2 or something. They say we're doing great, but they aren't really looking at whether they are doing as good a job as they could possibly do.
Yeah, that's true. And this happens with in some web page. Every time I go, I log out and I don't remember my password. And I always have to ask for a new password, and then you cannot repeat the password that you used before. So it's like, okay, what password can I use? And yeah, it's true. It's at the end you don't want to use this web page anymore.
Yes,
Yes.
I know. And I have a confession to make, him. I am using the same awful, weak, uh, fewer than 8-character password at Amazon that I set up probably 15 years ago. They have never asked me to change it. It is not a strong password, but it is still working just fine.
Mhm.
Where for some reason, now even Instagram now I'm in some kind of password hell loop with them where, like, every 3 days, they say, we think your activity is suspicious. And they
Really?
want me to log, either do CAPTCHA or reset my password or somehow authenticate with a text.
Hmm.
I mean, this is insanity. I realize it's a free product, but as an occasional paying user of them, I shouldn't have to go through this process.
No.
But somehow, uh, I do. And I've gone online to see and other people have that same problem. It seems to have to do with using multiple devices. So if
Oh,
I
yeah.
access from my Android phone, my iPad, my web interface, and Chrome browser, this seems to make them think, wow, this is kind of weird. Most people don't access 4 different ways in the same day. So we're going to put this person through a re-authentication process. And, it drives me crazy. But,
Yeah.
companies don't have to deal with it. The executives don't have to deal with this stuff. They never see it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And when I work with companies, you can see the difference of the companies where the owners try their products and when the owners they don't try it. You can see a big, big difference. And how can you apply
Absolutely.
how friction applies to habit and productivity?
Oh, well, okay. I think it's kind of interesting because we don't think in Silicon Valley, people typically understand friction. If you go to
Yeah.
Silicon Valley and talk to a software developer, mostly they understand friction. That doesn't mean they're always successful in winning friction battles with their security people or compliance people, but they tend to get it. But it also affects the way we behave as individuals. And we can form habits, we can break bad habits that we want to lose, and basically change our behavior by adding or subtracting friction. And this is something that habit experts have known for a while. My friend Art Markman has written several books on habits. He's a professor here at the University of
Mhm.
Texas, including Smart Change. And he had one downfall for a while. Right now, last time I saw him, at least, he was a slender, very fit-looking person. And I don't know if he's put on any COVID weight, but he's managed to maintain this pretty well over the years. But he used to be somewhat overweight, and his
Oh,
downfall were these containers of uh, Haagen-Dazs ice cream,
oh,
that premium ice cream that are, or Ben and Jerry's ice cream, a boutique ice cream that is absolutely delicious. That comes in containers that are supposed to contain 3 servings, if you read the label. But as an individual consumer, you start eating out of the container because it's not a big container,
yeah.
and pretty soon you see I'm almost halfway through this thing. I just have a few more bites, and you look and there's not really that much left in there. It's not worth putting back in the freezer, and you finish the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I can totally understand why he had a problem with this because I've had the same issue. And he found that the way to eliminate that, he tried various ways of cutting back, but the way to eliminate it was, or reduce that habit, was to not have it in his freezer at home. He didn't say, I can't have Haagen-Dazs ice cream. He just did not buy it at the store. So he knew that if he wanted it in a particular moment, he would have to drive to the store.
Hmm.
That created too much friction because he wanted it, but he didn't want it bad
Yeah.
enough to take 10 minutes to drive to the supermarket and pick some up.
Yeah.
And that even works on a much smaller scale. Researchers looked at M&M consumption. Now,
The
M&Ms are
same.
the little
Yeah.
psychologists love M&Ms as test tools because they are easily counted. They're uniform in size. It's not like eating a chocolate bar or a chocolate brownie where they're non-uniform or people take bites. Um, so they frequently use them in tests of candy consumption. And one of the tests that was performed uh, put a bowl of M&Ms very close to somebody a person at their workstation while they were at work at their desk, and they found that simply by moving the bowl maybe half a meter farther away, this would significantly reduce the number of M&Ms that were consumed by that worker. Why did it do that? Because instead of simply being able to reach out with their hand, the person would have to get up a little bit
Yes.
from their seat to reach. And just adding that little bit of friction reduced consumption. Another example with M&Ms was at the Google offices in New York City, where Google is famous for providing free food and free snacks to their people. And one of the problems that Google found was when you give people free snacks, especially enticing sugary snacks, people eat a lot of them and they put on weight. It's not healthy for them. So they said, well, they went to some behavioral scientists at Yale and said, okay, how can we, without prohibiting people or simply not buying these things, because then people would be unhappy, how can we change their behavior in some way? And so they performed a variety of experiments. One of them was to move the M&Ms to, instead of being in the front row of the food table, to move it farther back on the food table. And instead of a clear container, a clear glass bowl of M&Ms, they put it in an opaque container that people could not see through.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they did a couple of things there. They reduced the visual salience of those M&Ms by making them a little bit less obvious. Although, if you were an experienced consumer, you knew exactly where they were. But also, people would have to reach past the healthier snacks to get to the M&Ms. And they found that they reduced the monthly calories consumed of M&Ms by about 2 million calories in just that one Google office by that simple hack. And another similar experiment showed that by putting, even like in a cafeteria line, if you put the unhealthy snacks in a separate line where they had to be paid for separately, like putting the ice cream there, people would consume less of it. So these simple little hacks, by making something easier to do, you will do more of it. If you want to, say, run first thing in the morning, you're going to go for a run. This is your new daily habit or 3 times a week habit to run first thing in the morning. Then what you do is you put your running shoes right by the side of your bed. Maybe you even sleep in your running gear if that's comfortable to do, so that all you have to do is step out of bed, put on your running shoes, and go. If you want to avoid the run, you've got to take off those running clothes and put on some other clothes. So you're increasing friction for not running and reducing it for running. And simple hacks like these are really important. In fact, B.J. Fogg is one of the pioneers in behavior design. He's a researcher at Stanford. And he's used various hacks like these. He's the originator of the tiny habits method. And beyond simply making things easier, he recommends taking very simple steps to begin a habit. Like instead of deciding, okay, I'm going to floss every night, floss one tooth every night. That's a pretty simple habit, right? It takes very little effort, very low friction. And only when that has become part of your routine do you add a second tooth. And by taking these very tiny little low friction steps, you develop that habit rather than having to overcome the rather massive friction of saying, okay, I'm going to spend 3 full minutes of this rather unpleasant activity every night, because people will do that for 1 or 2 nights and say, no, this is too much effort.
Yeah, that's really interesting because sometimes you have to remove friction, but sometimes you need to add friction depending on the result that you want. That's really interesting. And for example, in a technical company, in a web page, how can you add, in which cases do you need to add friction? Is there any cases that you need to add friction?
Well, usually in the workplace, you're trying to minimize friction. Although one workplace example that I can think of is one of the classic behavioral science experiments, or a whole family of experiments, have been around getting people to properly use retirement plans, which in the U.S. and some other countries are optional. In other words, an employee can either sign up to contribute to a retirement plan or not do that, or they can perhaps vary the amount that they're putting in. And it's in the interests of the employee, it's in the interests of society in general for those people to save for retirement, because it's bad for society and bad for the
Yes.
individual if they reach retirement age and they have no money saved up and have to rely on, in the US, Social Security, in other
Yes.
countries, some other public program, which may prevent them from starving, but won't necessarily be the a very attractive way to retire. Now, what Richard Thaler pretty much won his Nobel Prize for was finding that simple nudges like automatically opting people into retirement plans uh, would increase the percentage participating in a huge way. And this was in no way an unethical nudge. People could still not participate. They simply, instead of filling out a form to participate, they filled out a form to opt out of it. And even a very simple form, it could be just a simple checkbox or two. But that tiny amount of friction to opt out, most people stayed opted in. So in this case, that little added friction was producing a benefit. Another similar example was one company found that employees were using their retirement savings almost like an ATM, a cash machine. If they had some short-term need, they needed to pay a big bill this month, they would call up their human resources department and say, "Oh, I need to take $200 out of my retirement plan."
Wow.
And that's not the way it's meant to be used, but their plan allowed for that. So what they did was they simply added a little bit of friction. They didn't change the requirement of the plan. You could still withdraw money for any reason or no reason, but they said, okay, to do that, you have to fill out this paper form. That simple change reduced the number of people who were withdrawing money from their plan for incidental bills by some big number, like 60%. So just adding a little bit of friction can reduce a negative behavior that's unhelpful. And I think this is probably a good place to interject that it's important to use friction in a way that is beneficial to the person you're trying to change the behavior of, that it has to be ethical, because companies
Yes.
have used this in unethical ways. And I think one good example is in making, say, as somebody sign up for something that they're paying a monthly fee for, a subscription, very easy to sign up for, maybe with an incentive at the front where you're going to get your first 2 months free. And then after that, this will just automatically renew every month. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of plan. But where adding friction gets to be unethical is when you add so much friction at the end where in order to
Yes.
unsubscribe, you subscribed online with one click, for example. To unsubscribe, now you have to call our customer service department during business hours, Monday to Friday, limited times, not during lunch.
It's common.
And you have to go through a long voice menu. And then you get to one person and you have to explain what you want. And they say, "Oh, you want to unsubscribe? Let me connect you to the subscription department." Then you go into another queue. And then finally you talk to another person who tries to talk you out of unsubscribing. Maybe they offer you extra deals, whatever. This is adding so much friction to that unsubscription process that many people simply don't do it. They either forget to do it. They say, "Oh, it's not business hours. It's Saturday. I'll call on Monday." And then they forget to call on Monday. Or partway through this process say, "Well, I'm too busy for this. I'll call back later tomorrow," and they forget. To me, that is an unethical use of friction where you are putting barriers in the way. I think product returns are another one. If you sell physical product, you can make returns easy or difficult. Returns tend to be very costly for companies that sell product, particularly, say, e-commerce companies. And some companies add friction to that process. They have a very narrow window when you can return products. You have to call into their customer service line, maybe during business hours.
Yes.
You have to pack it up yourself and ship it back to them. Amazon has taken a different approach. And the approach those companies take does reduce the number of returns because people forget, they try calling in, they don't get the satisfaction, and by the time they realize it, it's been too late. It's too late to return it. Or they just say, well, I don't have any boxes or packing tape. They decide, I'll just keep it. It's easier than returning it.
Yes.
But Amazon makes it super easy. You don't have to pack your package up. You can, first of all, you just jump online. You can get a return authorization in a few seconds.
Yes.
And you can return it multiple ways. You can take it to a lockbox, and those are everywhere. In Amazon, a locker. You can take it to a Whole Foods, to a Kohl's, very common retailers. You can take it to UPS, to the post office, various other places. If you destroyed your packaging, you can take it right to Whole Foods or UPS. They will even pack it up for you. They'll scan the barcode on your mobile phone. They'll pack it up, label it, all free of charge. Now this is expensive for Amazon. They are paying somebody else to pack this up, to label it. It's costing them extra money beyond the fact that that product you're returning may not be saleable. They may have to scrap it or try and get partial credit for it or something. Instead, despite this, they make it absolutely easy for you. And this is one reason why Amazon has such loyal customers. I know that I can buy with complete confidence from them that if there's a problem, I'm going to be easily able to return that. There's not going to be a problem. Where I've bought other stuff and, I've missed the return window. This eBay vendor does not accept returns. And if you buy on eBay, you'll find that the return process varies by the vendor, by the product. So this is why Amazon has such incredible loyalty with their customers.
Yeah, that's true. That happened to me with Iberia, the air company from Spain, that I pay a suitcase. They made me pay a suitcase that I didn't have with me. So they told me, don't worry, if there is a problem, you can call and we'll return the money back. I called and they sent me to the webpage. The webpage was not working, and they sent me to another phone. So I was passing by to I don't know how many people, and at the end, I never get my money back. And I try to fight with other companies. That's what they get. So it's not a good way of doing it. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yes, it's unfortunate that companies feel that they need to do this because one of the key drivers of loyalty, customer loyalty, is an effortless experience. Gartner, the big market research company,
Yes.
did some amazing work where they evaluated customer service interactions. What you just described, Gemma, is a customer service interaction where you tried to resolve this problem and got shuffled around and ultimately got no satisfaction. But what they found was that customers who had a high effort interaction were about 10 times as likely to be disloyal to that brand as customers who had a low effort interaction. They found that 94% of customers who had a low effort interaction would likely repurchase compared to just 4% of high effort customers. And we know how important word of mouth is these days. Customers want to know what other people are saying. They want reviews. They want ratings.
True.
They don't want to make that decision without some external input. And what Gartner found was phenomenal. They found that 88% of high effort customers who had a high effort experience, said they would be disloyal to that brand compared to just 1% of low effort customers, just 1%. And those numbers are insane. And what's even scarier than those numbers is that effort is not an absolute standard. You can't run some kind of a test and say, okay, now our effort is good. That effort is in your customer's head. It's whether they think their experience is low effort. And they are not comparing you to your direct competitors even. They're not comparing one airline to another airline. They're comparing that airline to Amazon, to Uber, to Zoom, whatever they think is low effort. And so if you're putting your customers through a high effort experience, you are creating the risk. You're really risking customer loyalty, and probably you will lose that customer sooner or later.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, that's the way it is. And so can we use it also to improve the relationships inside the company?
Uh, within the company,
Yes.
yeah. Well, I think often you have within a company a lack of trust between people, where the managers uh, and employees don't trust each other. Managers don't trust their people to do the job, and employees don't trust their managers to be honest with them. And trust and friction are somewhat opposites. And I can give you one example of that. In others, where there's a lack of trust, there will be more friction. And of course, lack of trust is a big driver of company disengaged employees.
Mm-hmm.
Today, there is an engagement crisis with employees, and Gallup, the big polling firm, constantly monitors employee engagement. And typically, they find that only 15% or so of employees are highly engaged with their employers. And this, of course, is the state that employers want. They want their employees to really be part of that team, be enthusiastic about their job and the company's mission. But the vast majority aren't. And about an equal number are actively disengaged, where they are not only not engaged, where they really don't care, but they actively dislike their job or their employer,
Yes.
and are not necessarily, it might be actually hurting them in some way. So engagement is important, and where there is a lack of trust, there will be much higher disengagement. And typically, where there is no trust, there's more friction. If I have cumbersome, difficult processes for my team members to go through, layers of approval. Okay, if you want to do this, your manager has to approve it. Maybe their manager has to approve it. That's because they don't trust the employee to do it right or to do it honestly. Uh, you know,
Yes.
uh, we've all been through those expense reporting processes. If you've ever worked for a big company, they have an expense report process where if you go on a trip, you've got to verify all your expenses. And sometimes it's crazy where you bought a coffee at the airport. You have to furnish a paper receipt for that coffee. Or
Yes.
worse even, now that we've gone digital, you have to take a picture of that receipt or do a digital scan of that receipt, which may be easier for the employer, but is more work for the employee. And I remember when in my brief stint back in the corporate world, having to do that, where if I went on a trip, especially one that involved multiple destinations, I have a big pile of paper at the end of it that I would have to mark these all down exactly. I'd have to record them on my expense report. I would
Yes.
have to staple them. Somebody on the other end would have to go through these. And I found that somebody was actually doing that, because one time I lost a $2 receipt. And they actually called me on it. They said, Roger,
Really?
there's a
For
problem
two
with your
dollars?
report. We couldn't
Wow.
approve that because there was a $2 receipt that was missing. And I was a senior VP in this company, right? And they didn't trust me enough that, okay, he lost his $2 receipt, we'll just give it to him or something. And I had to finally say, I can't find it, just take it off my report.
Wow.
Uh, and that somebody was checking these things, even it was wasting my time, it was wasting their time. It wasn't helping the company's bottom line. It was not required by law. It wasn't required by standard accounting practice. Later, I talked to the CFO after we had both left that company. I said, why did you do this? It makes no sense. He said, well, our management felt that we could not trust our employees to be honest and not cheat us. And that's why there's a lack of trust.
It
If
is
you look
difficult.
at highly successful companies like Netflix, they have what they call a no rules system, where they set guidelines. They're not going to check your timesheet. They're not going to check your expense report. They're going to tell you, we trust you to do a good job. Here is what our company mission is. Here is how you relate to that mission, how your function relates to that mission. And if you are doing what is correct for that mission, we will trust you to do that. Now, if you are not getting the desired results, if you are doing crazy things, with your expenses. If you charter a jet because you wanted to be someplace, so you want to be home for the weekend, they'll probably say this is not furthering our mission as it relates to our customers and our business, and say you should not do that. But they trust their people. I think another great example of trust in their people is the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. They empower each of their people to spend up to $2,000, a little less than 2,000 euros, on anything that will make the customer experience better without asking a manager. So
Wow, that's good.
the person who makes your bed in the hotel, if they encounter you and you have a problem, they can spend up to $2,000 to fix that problem without having to check with anybody. Now that is a huge level of trust. I would guess that there are some hotel companies that don't trust their people who make the beds to put the correct number of mints. They probably do a mint audit or chocolate audit to make sure that person isn't using up more mints than expected for the number of beds that they're making every day. But Ritz-Carlton does that, and this creates two things. First of all, it creates tremendous customer loyalty because customers, if they have a problem, it's going to be fixed. It's not going to say, "Gee, sorry, that's our policy," or "So sorry, I wish we hadn't done that. We can't fix it." It will be fixed, and it also creates tremendous employee loyalty and trust because every employee knows my manager, my company, my brand trusts me with their money. So in turn, trust is reciprocated. There's one of Robert Cialdini's 7 principles of influence is reciprocation, and often that applies to things or favors. If I do something for you, you'll do something for me in return, and that's been proven many, many times. But it also applies to trust. If I trust you, if I trust you in some way, you're much more likely to trust me in return. And when employers trust their people will trust them. When a manager trusts members of a team, they will trust that manager more. And when there's strong trust between members of the team, when sales trusts marketing, when manufacturing, how many times have you been talking to somebody in a manufacturing department and says, "Oh, those salespeople are terrible.
Yes.
They'll give away the store to the customer. They'll tell anything to the customer. They're liars." When manufacturing and sales trust each other, things get done in a much better way. Things are more effortless. They're smoother. There's less friction.
Yeah, that's true. And it happened to me too in the companies that they trust me and they let me do. I always have better results than in the companies that there was a lot of control and a lot of rules. And I had one example in a company. The company was going really well. We trust each other. We were like a family in the company. It was a small company, like 30 people. And then they hired a new director, and he put access control at the doors, and all the procedures, all the paperwork, all the policies, and the company is closed now. So it's like, wow, only changing one person and the way of working and destroy the business.
Right. Well, people will abuse those rules too. The same company with the $2 expense receipt process also put a normal limit for a meal is $35. Now, other companies would set a general guideline, or they would say during a certain day spend so much. But once you've got that sort of threshold that you should spend more than $35, it became more of a challenge to the employee to say, "Well, okay, they didn't reimburse me for that $50 meal that I had the other day. So instead of this meal costing $20, maybe I'll have an extra appetizer for a cocktail or something to hit that amount." Trust goes a long way in the company, and there's even some neuroscience behind that. Paul Zak is an oxytocin researcher, and oxytocin, he and his team discovered, is the hormone of human trust. When you exchange hugs, and I realize hugs aren't very common these days in the pandemic, And that's a great loss for all of us because it means we're getting less oxytocin. Hopefully, we've each got maybe a family member or loved one that we can get a
Yeah.
little bit of oxytocin from, or your dog. But uh, what he found was when he and his team studied companies, high-performing companies, they went into a variety of different companies, some high-performing, some not so high-performing, and they gave people surveys about the work environment, about all the different variables of whether they like their manager. They also looked at trust. Do you trust the company? Do you trust your coworkers? Do you trust your manager? And in addition to all the usual survey type questions, they took thousands of blood samples from
Oh,
those
wow.
people. And then when they got back and they analyzed all the results, they found that those companies where the people said on their surveys that there was a higher level of trust were the higher performing companies. So people who said there was more trust in their companies, those companies were higher performing companies. But here is the surprise, or maybe not surprise from Paul's next standpoint. At those same companies, the people tested had higher levels of oxytocin in their
Wow.
bloodstream. So where there was more trust, not just as shown by surveys, but by the levels of oxytocin in their blood, those companies were the high-performing companies. So if you can increase trust inside a company, you can increase your company's performance.
Wow, this is amazing. Yeah, but it's true. If you don't trust, you don't work the same. But in work and in family and everything, you need trust. Otherwise, it's difficult. Wow, it's amazing. So now to close, Roger, can you tell us 3 tips for the people that want to start thinking about removing friction in their business? How can they start?
Well, I think one thing is to actually experience whatever processes you're trying to do. If you are trying to reduce friction for your employees, actually do their job for a while and try and approach it as a newcomer. The same thing, maybe as number 2, would apply to your customers. Go through your processes as a customer and as a novice customer, because often we know what we're supposed to do. When I go to my company's website, I know exactly how to use it because I was part of the design
Yes.
process. I have used it many times, and if necessary, go to use somebody else as a means for doing that. The Also look at how you can reduce friction in your life. We talked about some examples. If you have things you're trying to do, focus on making those things easier. And again, approach it as if you were a third person or third party looking at yourself, not just from what you yourself know. So, if you can do those 3 things, reduce friction for customers, reduce friction for team members, and reduce friction for yourself, or occasionally increase it if necessary, you will be more successful in all ways.
Wow, thank you very much, Roger. It was really useful and really interesting, everything that you shared with us. Thank you very much again.
Well, thank you, Gemma. It's been a fun conversation.
Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again. Bye.